Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I am glad you could join me. Make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now, I got a really important episode. Obviously, this week is the 24-year anniversary of 9/11. It's crazy how time goes by, and I'm going to take a different approach because this is a day that was truly dark for America. If you were alive then, you remember it so vividly. You remember exactly where you were when you first heard that a plane hit the Twin Towers. You remember watching the second plane slam into the building, realizing this wasn't any accident. This was an attack on America. The shock, the fear, the sorrow. It seems like a lifetime ago. But for those who were alive, it's something that will always be a part of us. But you also remember something else. In the midst of all the darkness, we remember how the country came together in the aftermath. For a brief moment in time, politics didn't matter. It was completely irrelevant. Our differences didn't matter. We were Americans first, whether you were directly impacted because you were in New York City or you knew someone at the World Trade Center or you were 100,000 miles away, we all went through it together. And we saw flags flying, firehouses draped in red, white, and blue, neighbors checking in on each other, people donating blood and food, people standing in the streets, cheering on first responders, thanking them for all they do. Because we were going through this together as one people. There was a pride that existed, a love of country, a deep sense of unity. And of course, the mantra was never forget, never forget. But it seems that many did forget. Because when you fast forward to today, it feels like we live in a completely different country. We see the government abusing the very powers that people entrusted them with to protect us after 9/11. Bureaucrats put ideology before the mission. And far more dangerous than that is how instead of being proud of America, too many people are ashamed of it. Instead of uniting around the American identity, uniting around our values, people are trained to see each other as enemies. Waving flags, people are burning them. Mock it. Patriotism, and the flag itself is now viewed as a symbol of oppression and right-wing fanaticism. So we have to raise the question, how did we go from 9/11 and United We Stand to where we are now? A nation where a growing number of people actively despise their own culture and country. And I submit to you that it's not the majority of people. But it is growing. It's trending in that direction. And the answer can be summed up in a single word, oikophobia. Now, it's not a word that you hear every day, and most people never even heard that word before, but it's a condition that perfectly captures the cultural rot that we are witnessing throughout our entire country, throughout our society. And I just want to thank George Hill. Okay, got to give him credit because I interviewed him a few weeks ago. You can check it out. He put this idea on my radar. He mentioned oikophobia during our conversation, and it stuck with me. I've been thinking about it ever since. And frankly, it's what sparked the idea for today's episode because it explains so much about what we're living through. And oikophobia literally comes from the Greek words oikos, meaning home, and phobos, meaning fear or aversion. The term oikophobia was actually popularized by British philosopher Roger Scruton, but the idea itself goes all the way back to Plato. And Plato warned that when citizens lose respect for their own culture, their own traditions, when they begin to despise the very foundation of their society, of their existence, they create the conditions for collapse. And that's what we're seeing, not just here in America, but we're seeing this across the Western world. You know, so Roger Scruton, he was one of the leading conservative thinkers of our time, writing extensively on issues like culture and politics, philosophy. And he popularized the modern use of this word. He used it to describe the tendencies of Western intellectuals, these elites that constantly denigrate their own national culture. And for some reason, some warped reason, they idolize foreign cultures, other cultures, thinking that those are better. And For him, this mindset was especially dangerous because it undermined concepts of patriotism. It undermines national unity. And who is there to defend Western civilization? It's extremely destructive. We see this day in and day out. And I want you to think for a moment, instead of building on what we've inherited here in the United States over the course of a 250-year history, instead of being grateful for the principles and freedoms that define America, we have leaders, public officials, bureaucrats, professors, activists who all see it as something shameful, something that needs to be torn down, something that needs to be dismantled. That's where we are today. You know, after 9/11, there was no question. Americans loved this country. We saw that it was worth defending. It was worth protecting. It was a duty, an obligation. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but what nation is? Show me a nation that hasn't committed sin before. And all flaws and sins of our past didn't erase the greatness of America. But here we are, 24 years later, and we reached a point where that very belief, the idea that America is good, that Western civilization is worth preserving, is just simply mocked and dismissed. What's even more dangerous, it's not just coming from fringe groups. It's coming from people in power, and that's the danger. It's coming from the elected officials, the cultural elites, and they're trying to shape the next generation in our schools, in our universities, to think that way, to have shame in their country. Now, some do this for political gain because they see it as a quick path to power. Others genuinely believe that America is an evil country. Either way, the result is the same. It doesn't make a difference. A society that hates itself cannot and will not last. I will guarantee you that. And it's not confined to the United States. You look at the Western world, look at the United Kingdom, you look at Sweden, you look at France, free speech under assault, people being investigated for what they say online. You know, we look at Britain. I think Britain's a great example because pride in British history and tradition is treated as something that's toxic. The same thing holds true in all these other Western cultures. What we're seeing is a preview of what's going to happen next if we continue down this path. So that's where I want to go in this episode. We're going to look at how this oikophobia took root and why it's spreading. We're going to look at the consequences, the threat that it poses to our freedom, to our way of life, because the reality is a civilization that despises itself can't survive. When we come back after this break, I'm going to dive into the heart of the issue. I'll provide you with real-world examples of oikophobia in action, the reasons behind it, why it's being pushed so aggressively by those in power. So everyone hang tight. I'll be right back. It's no secret that as we age, our bodies begin to break down. Now, if you want to move with ease and keep your skin glowing and youthful, you got to try Native Path Collagen. It's made with only type 1 and 3 collagen. These are the two most important types that make up 90% of your body's collagen, and they're found in your skin, bones, joints, and gut. They deliver powerful benefits without any fillers or additives. I have it every morning with my coffee, and it's a single ingredient, flavorless powder that mixes easily into the coffee. But you could also put it in smoothies, oatmeal. It's third-party tested for purity, and it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide form. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, and 8,000 5-star reviews, Native Path is a brand you could trust, backed by a 365-day no-risk guarantee, live phone support where you talk to a real person. They make it easy to get started. So check out the bundle deals and join their private Facebook group for recipes and support. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. So I laid out the concept of oikophobia, the disdain, even hatred for one's own country and culture. And we looked at how in just 24 years, America has gone from a moment of unity and pride after 9/11 to a place where patriotism is mocked. Flags, monuments, statues, they're all treated as symbols of oppression, and too many Americans believe that their own country is irredeemably evil. And so we have to dig deeper. We have to understand what this looks like in practice. We have to understand why is this happening and why is it so dangerous? And in practice, we see it daily, right? We see it on our college campuses. We see it in the media. We see it from the elected officials. And I want to start with the elected officials because they set the tone for the rest of the country. And too often, they're a major part of the problem because I want to make it clear before I start bashing the officials. I have no problem with criticism of government. I think it's healthy. I criticize the government and the politicians all the time. I criticize policies. I bash the politicians. I criticize the bureaucracy. I mean, I've been on a rampage against the bureaucracy since I started this podcast. That's part of living in a free society. And when politicians criticize each other, when they go after political opponents, rhetorically, when they go after each other's political parties, I understand that's politics, okay? It's ugly, it's messy, it's part of the system. I get that. But where I draw the line is when those same officials go beyond policy, when they start to denigrate America itself, when they trash our founding, when they dismiss our history, when they smear our culture as an evil culture, that's where I have a big problem. I mean, our culture isn't perfect, but there is a clear distinction that we need to make. Our government is not America, and America is not our government. America is bigger than the politicians in Washington, D.C. or any state capital. America is bigger than the politics of the moment. America is an idea. It's a culture. It's an identity. It's a set of principles and traditions that millions of people have fought and died to preserve. So when elected officials attack America itself, not just political opponents and policies, they're doing something that's far more dangerous. They're fueling the very oikophobia that weakens us from within. And it's extraordinarily destructive because there are two types of people. The ones who don't really believe in the nonsense, the garbage that they're peddling, but they do it anyway for political gain. These people are pathetic. They're cowards. They should be voted out of office immediately. But then there are the true believers, the ones who genuinely think America is evil, ones who believe that America must be destroyed, that it must be dismantled. And those are the most dangerous because they'll stop at nothing to dismantle our way of life and force everyone to succumb to their warped vision of what they think is just and right. Now, just the other day, you had Rashida Tlaib blast America as a country founded on racism. Take a listen to what she had to say.
They thought they could kill us, rape us, imprison us, violently uproot us from our olive tree farms, starve our children to death, and we would disappear. Well, guess what? Now we're in Congress, and we're every corner of the United States. Y'all, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. They will never truly comprehend, even after 7 decades, that we aren't going anywhere. We are just getting started. I want to say to all of them, every genocide enabler, look at this room's mother. We ain't going anywhere.
She has a history of making comments like these. I just don't have time to play them all. Then you have Congresswoman Delia Ramirez. She was given a speech in Mexico City on foreign soil, and she proudly exclaimed that she is, quote, a proud Guatemalan before I'm an American. Now think about that for a moment. She is someone who swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States, an oath to represent the people of a district and this country, not to represent Guatemala. And when someone puts another country ahead of America while serving in Congress, haven't they essentially betrayed the oath of office? I mean, let's be honest about this. Then you have Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, another prime example, constantly bashing the United States. Who could forget? You know, we're at the 24th anniversary of 9/11. Who could forget when she described 9/11, the worst terrorist attack on our soil, as some people did something? That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was her minimizing the tragedy that killed nearly 3,000 innocent people that day. And we've had thousands of 9/11 related deaths since. So the number is closer to 10,000 Americans killed from that one incident. But she doesn't care. She looks at it as if America is the problem. She is someone that believes that America is founded on the principles of genocide. She actually spoke about that as if our history and progress can be reduced to some stupid accusation that she's making. Now, I know the left is going to come after me for saying this. They'll accuse me of being a misogynist, a racist, a xenophobe, the usual playbook that they always do. But the reality is I'm calling out these people not because of who they are, not because of what their genders are, not because of the color of their skin. I call them out because of what they said. It's their own words. And unfortunately, it just so happens that they are the ones who have made some of the dumbest, most reckless comments about this country. You know, the Ilhan Omars, the Zorhan Mandanis of the world, they embody this hypocrisy of oikophobia, not for nothing. but they came to America, the land of opportunity. They were able to achieve the American dream. They rose to positions of power and influence that would have been impossible in most other countries around the world, including the countries that they came from. That fact alone should be the most powerful testament to the greatness of America. Instead of using their platform to inspire American pride, to inspire gratitude, they use it to denigrate the very nation that took them in, the very nation that made their success possible. And that right there, that's the heart of the problem. Show appreciation. Be grateful, thankful for what America has offered you. Don't sit there and constantly bash it, praise it, celebrate it. Encourage others to try and achieve the American dream. It's amazing how so many people have benefited from the United States. So many people have been beneficiaries of America's promise, and yet they're the ones that are a harshest critic. And unfortunately, the far left has hijacked the Democratic Party. I mean, you look at it, and I'm talking about the Democratic Party in general. I'm talking about the activists in the streets. They never have anything nice to say about the United States, constantly bashing it. And there are a whole host of moderates in the Democratic Party that don't agree with the far left. They do love their country, but they don't speak up against members of their own party. They allow the radicals to make it as if America is the problem itself, and they want to tear it down. And the Democratic Party needs to step up, because if you go back to the 1990s, yes, I disagreed with Tom Daschle, I disagreed with Dick Gephardt constantly, but I had no doubt where their loyalties lie. I had no doubt about their love of country. You juxtapose that with the modern Democrats, and it's a completely different story. It's like these people are Trojan horses, because they come in and what they're doing is eroding the very foundations of America from the inside. They're using the freedoms this country provides to delegitimize the country. That's not going to make America a better place. That's not going to strengthen America. It's going to weaken it. But that's what they want to do. Okay, it's about dismantling it. They want to replace it with a system that centralizes power in the hands of government and bureaucratic elites as long as they're the ones in charge. A system where freedom is no longer the default, but the exception. Where identity politics is going to trump individuality. Where dependency on government is going to replace self-reliance. Where loyalty to ideology is going to replace loyalty to country. And the truth is, they don't want to fix America. They want to fundamentally transform it into something that we wouldn't recognize. And once you convince enough people that their own country is rotten to the core, you can justify tearing it down. You could justify tearing down the institutions. You could justify dismantling the Constitution. It's why they frame the United States as nothing more than a story of slavery, oppression, evil, exploitation, as though that defines the entire American experience. If you constantly tell people the country is irredeemable, deplorable, why is anyone going to want to defend that? Why would anyone want to preserve that? If we truly were founded on sin, if that was the sole basis for the existence of the United States, you're not going to defend that. Why would you? And the problem isn't just with the politicians and the bureaucrats. We see this ideology infecting our entire education system. Students aren't being taught about our history or the roles and responsibilities of our institutions. They're not being taught why federalism is such an important concept, why it was designed to limit government power, why it exists to protect liberty. They can't even give a basic definition of liberty and freedom. And many students today can't pass a basic citizenship test. Trust me, I know. I just gave one last week, and maybe one or two or maybe three at most actually passed it. This is not by accident. For decades, our schools have been moving away from civics. They have moved away from teaching students what it means to be American. Instead, they want to replace it with this obsession over grievances and social justice, identity politics, and activism. And the goal isn't to produce a well-informed citizenry who could think critically for themselves, who could critically look at government and its policies and hold it accountable in any real way. The goal is to produce a compliant and obedient citizenry who's going to accept whatever narrative they're given. And that's why you see students who can't explain the Bill of Rights but could tell you all about their so-called white privilege or their so-called oppression. That's why they know the language of activism but not the language of liberty. And when you raise an entire generation to believe their country is evil, their freedoms are oppressive, what do you think's going to happen next? What do you think? Well, you're going to end up with young Americans who sympathize with our enemies, who glorify terrorists, who see patriotism as something to be mocked and shamed. And I want you to think about how just last year, videos went viral of young Americans praising Osama bin Laden and his letter to America. They called it eye-opening. And they said, well, bin Laden, well, he was right. Is it any wonder that why 30% of those under the age of 29 believe bin Laden's ideas were a force for good? Here's a guy that committed one of the worst terror attacks the worst terror attack on U.S. soil, the deadliest day on U.S. soil. And they're saying he was a force for good, that he killed fellow Americans. Think about how warped and demented that really is. Think about how warped and demented it is to see so many openly support and defend Hamas, a terrorist organization, a brutal terrorist organization that slaughters innocent civilians and represses its own people. That's oikophobia on full display. Queers for Palestine. Go to Palestine. See how that works out for you. So you're going to glorify those who attack the West, have hatred for the very freedoms that allow you to speak so openly, and just think, one day these are going to be the same people that become the teachers, the lawyers, the journalists, the corporate executives, the judges, and the elected officials themselves. They will be the policymakers entrusted to uphold the American system. And think about this logically. How can you possibly uphold the system that you've been conditioned to hate so much? So we have the politicians, the political class, you have the academics, you have media and culture. I mean, turn on the television, scroll through social media. You'll see these cultural elites sneering at the idea of patriotism, mocking it, making fun of it. Being pro-American is treated, it's corny and dangerous. It's a symbol of white supremacy. It's far-right extremism. It's Mussolini reincarnated. The American flag is something where people feel nervous. They feel intimidated when they see a car drive by that has an American flag. But they praise these foreign ideologies, many of which are pretty damn totalitarian. They praise them. They celebrate them. These aren't isolated incidents I'm talking about. It's the symptoms of a much larger disease throughout Western civilization, because there are far too many within the cultural elite, the writers, the academics, the political class, the entertainers, who embrace this idea. It makes them feel enlightened, morally superior to everyone else. They love to virtue signal. They're so quick to condemn their own culture. It's completely ridiculous. And in reality, they're just eroding the foundation that gave them the freedom to speak in the first place. I mean, you look at the United Kingdom, and they say, oh, MAGA's now using the United Kingdom as an excuse. The reality is the United Kingdom is a powder keg. It's ready to blow. One little spark, and that entire country is going to be engulfed. You have the political and bureaucratic elites who constantly denigrate their own people, who constantly put everyone else ahead of their own citizens. They bend over backwards for all these global causes and outside interests, while the British people are left behind. And the British people are watching their culture erode, their history erode, their voices being silenced. People are going to get mad and angry about that. It's not something that is rocket science here. People are being investigated in Britain, even arrested for online posts. They could be jokes, maybe political commentary. I mean, waving a British flag in the wrong context can be treated as harassment and land you in prison. Well, what is this wrong context? Well, it's whatever the powers that be deem. You know, British culture is being treated as something that's shameful. The very idea of being proud of being British is recast as bigotry and xenophobia. I want you to listen to a clip. But listen, now this was a couple of years ago. It's Hamza Yusuf. His parents were Pakistani immigrants to Scotland. He serves in the Scottish Parliament. Take a listen to what he says.
And to my colleagues on the government bench, we know that we are not immune either. Some people were surprised. They were taken aback even by the mention on my social media that 99% of the meetings I go to, I'm the only non-white person in the room. But why are we so surprised when the most senior positions in Scotland are filled almost exclusively by those who are white? Take my portfolio alone. The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. the head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every prison governor, white. And not just justice, the chief medical officer, white. The chief nursing officer, white. The chief veterinary officer, white. The chief social work advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white. That is not good enough. I don't doubt that if I looked across the private sector, that black and minority ethnic people would similarly be underrepresented at senior levels. This is a collective failure on every single one of us.
I mean, this guy's got to be kidding me. We're talking about Scotland. We're talking about a place that is 96% white? This is the idiocy that exists today. How many white people serve in the Pakistani parliament, the Chinese Communist Party, the Indian legislative body, Saudi Arabia, Japan? I haven't done much research to check that out, but my guess is probably zero. And I think that I'm pretty safe if I was to make a bet about that. So in a place where 96% of the population identifies as white, this guy is mad that there are too many white people in positions of leadership. That's the level of absurdity we've reached. You have the majority population of a nation, they're made to feel guilty simply because they exist. And this politician and other politicians exploit identity politics to tear down national pride, to tear down unity. And the frightening part is how there are so many people in positions of power throughout the United Kingdom that think exactly the same way he does. There is little doubt about the creeping authoritarianism in the United Kingdom. This isn't about tolerance. It's not about progress. It's not about accepting other people. We here in the United States have done that. We coexist pretty well. There's no other nation like ours. But what it's really about is control. Once society embraces oikophobia, the door is wide open for bureaucrats and politicians to start clamping down on liberty, all under the guise that they're protecting people from being offended. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And what's happening in the United Kingdom is exactly what Plato warned about thousands of years ago. When a society loses respect for its own traditions and culture, it's going to collapse from within. We're seeing this in real time, over 2,000 years of British history and culture being dismantled before our very eyes. And it's partly due to a large influx of migrants that don't want to assimilate into British culture, but it's also by the leaders who are ashamed of their own civilization. They're determined to erase it in the name of virtue signaling. Then they wonder why so many Britons are mad. Then they wonder why people are so angry. And it's not just Britain. They're just one example. We're seeing the same thing in places like France, Italy, Sweden, so many other European countries. And the reason that oikophobia is so dangerous is because you will not survive. If you despise your own country, you won't defend it. If you believe your culture is evil, you're not going to pass that evil culture on to the next generation. You need to destroy it. If you think your freedoms are oppressive, you're going to willingly surrender them to the almighty state. And Americans, we're bickering back and forth, tearing ourselves apart. What do you think our enemies are thinking? What do you think China, Russia, Iran are thinking? They're watching, they're laughing, they're waiting. They know they don't have to destroy us militarily. They know that if we continue down this path, we're doing a damn good job of destroying ourselves from within. And so the next question becomes, what do we actually do about it? If oikophobia is the disease, what's the cure? How do we push back against the corrosive mindset and rebuild pride in our nation, rebuild pride in Western civilization that has led to tremendous advancements over the last couple of millennia, advancements that have benefited every corner of the world, not just the Western civilizations? That's what I want to tackle in the final segment, the solutions, the actions that we can take, and why we need to reject oikophobia at every turn, why it's essential we destroy this disease. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, before I jump back into the topic of the day, oikophobia, a few quick things. If you haven't already, make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode of the P.A.S. Report. Share this podcast with 5 friends and family members. That's how we grow this movement. That's how we push back against this toxic idea of oikophobia. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, take a moment to leave a 5-star review. It only takes a moment, and it helps more people discover the show. So in the first 2 segments, I laid out what oikophobia is and how it's showing up here in America, across the Western world, and why it poses such a danger to our civilization. We've seen how it manifests itself in our politics, our schools, our media, in broader culture. We look at America, the United Kingdom, France, Sweden. We see examples of where this road leads, a society where national pride is shamed, speech is censored, freedom eroded in the name of this idea of progress, social justice, they say. So the question is, what do we do about it? If oikophobia is disease, what's the cure? And the first solution is actually simple, but it's powerful. We must unapologetically reclaim patriotism and nationalism. Too often, these terms are misrepresented, and it's usually deliberately. Patriotism is love of country, pride in the principles, the values, and the traditions that define America. It's what helps create the American identity. It's the feeling you get when you see the flag raised, when you hear the national anthem and you stand for it, when you remember the sacrifices made by so many who came before us. Patriotism is emotional, it's personal, and it's a bond we feel as Americans. Nationalism, on the other hand, it's much broader. Nationalism is a set of standards within society, what's right and wrong, what's acceptable or unacceptable. It's the acceptance of the American creed that creates the American identity, the belief that regardless of race, color, or creed, we are bound together by a common identity as Americans, something that's different than any other nation on this planet, because e pluribus unum, out of many one, out of many different people from the many different places comes one nation. Nationalism, it promotes patriotism by reminding us that we are part of something greater than ourselves, that we have a sense of purpose. It motivates us to help our fellow citizens in times of crisis, just as we saw after 9/11, when Americans lined up to donate blood, when they sent supplies to Ground Zero, when they applauded first responders, they stood in the streets cheering and celebrating them, when they checked in on their neighbors. Many people have tried to disparage nationalism because they despise the nation-state complex. And they always point to Hitler and the Nazis, right? Anytime you want to try and make something taboo, you point to Hitler and the Nazis. Now, Hitler exploited and perverted nationalism to justify tyranny, conquest, and genocide. But that is a distortion of what true nationalism means. American nationalism is rooted in the Constitution, in the principles of self-government, in the concept of liberty. It's not about blood or soil. It is about a set of shared values that define who we are as a people. And when you practice it properly, nationalism strengthens our society. See, you need nationalism to promote the idea of civic virtue. How do we become good citizens and good stewards of the nation that we're in? How do we ensure that patriotism is more than just a feeling and starts to become a way of life? Without patriotism and nationalism, America cannot survive. That's where you get tribalism. And tribalism hasn't worked out well on the world stage, as we witness in Afghanistan or Syria or Libya. Patriotism gives us pride, and nationalism gives us purpose. Together, they are the antidote to oikophobia, but that's not the only solution. Secondly, we need to restore civic education. For decades, our schools have stopped teaching students the basics of our system. They don't force students to read the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They don't teach students federalism and the separation between the federal government and state government. They don't teach about checks and balances. Instead, our classrooms, they've been turned into activist factories. Now, if we want to preserve liberty, we need to teach young people what liberty actually is, what it means. So if we want to destroy this concept of oikophobia, this disease, it has to start with civics and history. And I'm talking about real history. I'm not talking about the 1619 Project, the distorted narrative that reduces America to nothing but its flaws. I'm talking about real history, the unique history that you hear on the America's Founding series on Thursdays. So make sure that you check it out. Because an educated citizenry is the only safeguard against tyranny. James Madison. Knowledge is the best defender against tyranny. Third, we have to defend freedom of speech and thought relentlessly. If you are American, I suggest you do your research into what's going on in the United Kingdom, because it serves as a warning sign of what happens when oikophobia merges with authoritarianism. Once leaders decide speech is dangerous, well, guess what? Freedom disappears. And here in America, we've already seen how the government will collude with social media companies, how they'll censor dissent. We've seen parents labeled as extremists for showing up at school board meetings to complain about what their children are learning about. We've seen whistleblowers get silenced. So we have to draw a line in the sand. Otherwise, we are going to wake up in a society where liberty exists only on paper, not in practice. And you're only going to get to exercise those liberties, whatever dear leaders in power allows us to. And then finally, it comes down to each and every one of us, ordinary Americans. You don't need to run for office to make a difference. You could start by speaking out in your everyday life. Don't let yourself be silenced by the mob. Push back against the nonsense. Don't be an a-hole. Don't berate other people. Always be respectful, but never shrink away, because cowardice is exactly what got us here. You need to show courage even when it may not be popular. Don't allow those who despise America to redefine her. Speak with courage and conviction. Remind the world that this country is worth defending, that we are the greatest country to ever exist in the history of human civilization. Teach your kids to love your country. Support organizations and officials who defend Western values. Go out and vote. There are so many people that are so consumed with their daily lives, and I understand that we're busy people. But you're not too busy to get involved. Don't say it doesn't matter. Because guess what? If this system comes crashing down, what do you think is going to come next? Do you think it's going to be any better? I could assure you it will not be. And maybe when we lose our everyday luxuries, when we lose all the things we've taken for granted, like liberty, maybe only then we'll realize just how precious and how fragile freedom really is. Remember, silence in the face of oikophobia only allows it to spread. 24 years ago, America faced a tragedy unlike anything we've witnessed before, and we survived it. We survived it. The reason we survived it was because for a brief moment, we remembered who we were as a people. We remembered we were Americans first. We stood shoulder to shoulder, not as Republicans or Democrats, not as red states or blue states, but as one people. That spirit, that love of country, that blend of patriotism and nationalism is what saw us through the darkest days of 9/11. If we want to preserve this country, if we want to keep the freedoms that make Western civilization unique, we have to reject this poison. We have to remind ourselves and each other that America is not evil. America is not irredeemable. That America is a good place. America is a just place. And America is worth defending, because a civilization that despises itself will not survive. A civilization that believes in itself, that remembers its history, that remembers its principles, its people, that civilization could withstand everything. So that's going to do it for this episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast. I want to thank you for joining me as we reflect on the 24th anniversary of 9/11 and the challenges that we face today. Don't forget to share this podcast with others. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, leave a 5-star rating and take 30 seconds to write a good review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com. And follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.